Name's Dustin Cormier. Welcome to my show. This is How to Rock Spirit. Today I've got a fancy, funky whole thing lined up for you guys. I've actually still got to get it right. Yeah. Today we are going to do something that I've been working on for quite a little while. We are going to work on our first episode in the series called the Chinese Astrology and Tropical Vedic Astrology series, where we're going to combine the signs we see in Taoist Chinese astrology, the year signs, the month signs, and the day sign, that Ba-Zi. We're going to combine Ba-Zi with the classical, traditional, tropical Western astrology that we all know and love in the West. I'm going to combine these two together. Today is like, I guess you could call this a tryout with everything that I got going on here. It's like the pilot episode. I don't know if it's going to be the thing that we end up using for this particular combination, or it might, depending on how it goes. Today's episode is going to be on the year, or the sign of the rat, with combined with a prominent emphasis of Leo, Aries, or Scorpio in the tropical horoscope. So, yeah, nice to meet you. I'm Dustin Cormier. I'm this fella here. Yeah, so I figured I'd tell you guys who I am to show who you're getting this lesson from. I'm Leo Ascendant, Scorpio Sun, Sagittarius Moon. I'm born year of the goat, in the month of the boar, and in the day of the water horse. If you've been watching my Chinese astrology episodes, you'll note that the water, the day stem, is the most important, the day stem is the most important element, the most important figure of the Chinese astrology chart. So I'm a water horse. And today's episode, we are going to be looking at, as I said, the year of the rat, called Zi in Chinese, with people with prominent emphasis in Aries, Scorpio, and Leo, including if you've got the sun in any of these places. As well, I also aim to make the point that it's your sun and your ascendant lord are the key places that we're describing with these three signs: Aries, Leo, and Scorpio. Yeah, so let me know what you guys think of it. I'm going to be bouncing around from a few panels here. Please don't hesitate to let me know in the comments whether you think my analysis is accurate, correct, whether you think it's whack, you know. I guess I should say, this Chinese astrology in relation to tropical Western astrology, something that's hardly been done. There's a lot of groundwork metaphysically, philosophically, theologically that has to be done in this particular combining of cultural astrological paradigms. So there's a lot of work to be done, and what I'm trying to do is just start the ball rolling by combining what I think it could mean to have a Western sign emphasis with a Chinese sign emphasis. So feel free to let me know what you think of all this. Whether you want to make a comment on the fact that they don't work together or something, or if you actually read my analysis and just think that the combinations don't seem to ring true for you, if you're in the sign of the rat with a prominent emphasis in one of these signs, let us know, because Chinese astrology is new territory for Western occultism, and your contribution is an invaluable I'm reading from a script, that's why I'm messing this up. Chinese astrology is new territory for Western occultism, and your contribution is invaluable to our community. That's what I wanted to say. Because this whole thing is just starting out, you know, how exactly to relate the Chinese signs with the Western signs. But we're going to talk about it today. Some shameless self-promotion here. Check out the description to see a link to my website, dustincormier.net, where you can check out my new poetry book that's up on Amazon. It's called Solipsis Eclipse. You can check it out for yourself, as well as my band, the Goombas. You can check us out and listen to some of our music. Now, as I said, this is a bit of a pilot episode, so I'm just kind of learning to work out what this whole thing is going to end up becoming. I see I just got a viewer here. For anyone watching, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll be poking away and saying and checking out. This might be relevant for a Leo ascendant. Yep, that's right. That's the idea that I'm going for here. We're going to be talking about anybody who has, like I said, a prominent placement in the three signs that are described as the Fire Pancha Tattvas. That's Leo, Aries, and Scorpio. So yeah, if you're a Leo ascendant, I'm a Leo ascendant too. So yeah. And if you've got the year of the rat going on. Any comments you feel like making, Lewis the dog and friend, please feel free. Because these videos, I'm trying to make them a community thing, you know. I'll rap on about the signs and combinations for a while, and then whoever decides to make a comment, we'll rap about it. See if we can glean some information from it. Okay. Yeah. So, we're organizing our Western signs through the Pancha Tattvas. That's something that I'm going to be trying to do. The Pancha Tattvas, what exactly does that mean? It relates to the word five, it translates to 5 true essences. Pancha means 5, and the Tattvas means essences or elements of something. I wanted to get a deeper root for the Western signs instead of grouping them by element and mutability, which most people do. So that's why we're grouping the Western element of these readings so weirdly. You know, what do Leo, Aries, and Scorpio have in common? They are all considered and grouped under what's called the Fire Pancha Tattva, which is mostly signified like Mars. But the sun, according to Ernst Wilhelm's Graha Sutras, the sun is typically grouped in with Mars, and the moon is grouped in with Venus. And that, of course, I believe comes from Parashara Horashastra. That's a line that I should probably write down. Yeah. Kind of doing these things as I go. Like I said, this is a bit of a beta test for me here, folks. So, most people organize the Western signs by, you know, there's the 3 of each element, and the 3 mutabilities of each element, and the 4 elements. 3 times 4 makes 12. But what I like to say, as we see here, you know, is that Western writers, when they're talking about the sun signs, it seems like there's extra information in there that's deeper than just the 3 by 4 equals 12 schema. You know, there's things in the sign of Aries that make it, that, you know, being ruled by Mars, that make Aries what it is and Scorpio what it is, that you wouldn't assume just because they're fire signs, or because Aries is a fire sign, you know? Aries and Scorpio are both ruled by Mars. So these are the deeper connections in the signs that I'm trying to illuminate by grouping them into these Pancha Tattvas. And I'm hoping we'll see that it is self-evident that these groupings are important and give critical information about the sun signs. or the signs. I like to say astrology is so much more than the sun signs, so that's why we're putting a big emphasis on this being more than just being about the sun. Although I should say that anyone who is watching this now, if you want to watch it at the very end, we're going to do a discussion of various books that talk about, for example, the year of the rat with the sun in Leo or the sun in Aries. And when we read those readings, we have to consider them as being all about the sun. Because that's usually when people talk about the Western signs, they break them down through the sun. But of course, the sun has its own qualities and relationships with the signs in astrology, which those writers probably don't usually consider. You know, for example, that the sun is debilitated in Libra. That says something about the way the sun works in the sign of Libra. So that's the kind of thing we're keeping in mind and being objective about when we talk about sun signs in astrology. Now, Mars and the sun rule the Fire Tattva, like I said. So that's what we're going to talk about today. If you have the sun, if you have your ascendant, or your ascendant lord in any of these signs, then this video will be relevant for you. And, you know, also if you have a prominent placement of the sign of the rat in your Chinese astrology. The sun and the ascendant in particular are the key figures for this reading. That's what I'm trying to wrap all this around to. Also, if your Atmakarika is either the sun or Mars, you might also get something out of this reading. And at the very end, we'll do a reading specifically describing the sun in these signs with the sign of the rat. Okay, folks. Now, I'm a tropical Vedic astrologer in the same vein of Ryan Kirksack, Victor Kara, Ernst Wilhelm, and these guys. Tropical Vedic astrologer. So I do not use the sidereal starry constellations to define the rashis or the signs. I use tropical coordinates for what is considered to be the sign of Aries, for example. I consider that it starts in spring, which is something that's has to do with the cycle of the Earth rotating around the sun more than it does the placement of the stars in the sky. So Western astrologers using a circular birth chart should have no trouble with my style. I mean, ultimately, if you're sidereal, you can watch these videos and the knowledge will be the same. I just like to make the point that I'm trying to go for tropical astrology, and my personal philosophy does not consider the sidereal constellations as the grouping of the rashis. I might take this whole bit out. Like I said, this is a beta test, and I feel like even if you are a sidereal rashi user, you can still get something out of this video. I'll probably take that out next time. It's me being a Scorpio, being a dink, trying to make a point. Yeah, so for a moment, So as a Vedic astrologer, I must stress that when you listen to a cookbook style reading, like this one, like this video, where you just take one element, rat, and you take this other thing, the Fire Pancha Tattvas, and you just smash them together, you must consider a lot of things before you write yourself off as either the negative qualities that you're reading about or the positive qualities of the reading that you're reading about. There's a lot to consider when you're hearing about the qualities. You got to consider the dignity of the planet and the sign ruler of, for example, if your sun is in Leo or Aries. No, I should say if your sun is in Aries or Scorpio, you have to consider where the ruler of the sign that the sun is in. The ruler of Aries and Scorpio is Mars. So the sun usually does well in Aries and Scorpio because they're natural friends, as we're going to see in our next slide. But if you've got the sun in Scorpio and your Mars is badly placed, Mars being a key limb that your sun sign is trying to lean on in order to express itself, if that thing that it expresses itself through is broken, that being Mars, or if it's not being efficient, then you might read some of the negative parts of the qualities that we're going to talk about today, including in regards to the year of the rat. We're going to read about the Chinese sign, the rat, and everybody has the potential to use their God-given qualities in a negative or positive way. Typically, the year of the rat, like all the other signs, has good qualities, attributed to it, and it has bad qualities attributed to it. Weaknesses. Every strength must imply that there is a weakness somewhere, especially in Chinese astrology. Chinese astrology kind of insists that we all have to compensate for each other's natures and energies in order to get along best in the world. So, the year of the rat, for example, has these certain qualities that can be abrasive to people, that can rub people the wrong way. Every sign has these qualities. How well the rat does often depends on how well the Chinese sign does, often depends on the positive or negative karmas of the Tropical Vedic Astrology chart. Because for me, the tropical chart is really the core of the soul. The Chinese astrology is describing subconscious a subconscious aesthetic nature that kind of is on the surface of the tropical chart. And it involves the use of other people. It involves other people. That's where your Chinese animal mostly comes out, is when you're dealing with other people and their energies. So, when you are listening to the readings that we're going to talk about today in regards to the rat, or in regards to these 4 signs, consider the dignity of the planet, whether it's the sun or the ruler of the sun, being Mars, that in Aries and Scorpio, the sign ruler. If your planet that we're talking about, let's say it's your ascendant, even if we're talking about a Virgo ascendant whose Mercury is in Scorpio, okay? If you're a Virgo ascendant, Mercury is the ruler of your chart, and wherever it goes is going to be a huge dimension of everything that you are. And if Mercury is in Scorpio, and there's so many things to consider, if it's Mercury, let me think. I'm just using Mercury as an example. I think that Mercury is good friends with Mars. So this is why we use textbooks, folks. Mercury is, Mars is neutral to Mercury. So if Mercury is in the sign of Scorpio, it's in a neutral sign. So it can do well. It can do okay there. But if you have a malefic with Mercury there, it makes Mercury even more malefic. Like if you've got Mars in Scorpio with Mercury, the Mars will do really good in Scorpio, so that won't be so bad. Let's say if you've got Saturn and Mercury in Scorpio, and Mercury is your ascendant lord. There's some problems going on there because your ascendant lord is in a neutral sign. It's being hit with a malefic Gra a malefic planet, that being Saturn, all these things are going to mess up how that Mercury comes along and tries to do what it wants to do and try to act on what it wants to act. So that's when you're going to start probably feeling that there's going to be some negative qualities to the year of the rat reading. So if you have the thing that I'm talking about in that particular instance, you might read something about the year of the rat, and if it says the rat that can be negative in this way, and if you see that in yourself, you might correlate it to the damaged ascendant lord in the Vedic chart. These are the kind of connections that, I mean, there's no formula for, but that we ought to see going on, because Chinese astrology and Tropical Vedic they're non-dual. They're talking about the same entity being active on two different levels of consciousness, that being us. We're active on much more levels of consciousness than we think we are, than just like the one level of conscience that most people think. So there's a million things, you know. So what I say here is that every chart has a destiny, and it's up to you how to use the elements of the chart to unlock the best of the energies that are described there. Everybody can use their energies properly and in the right way once they get enough data about it, right? Even if you've got some severe damage in your chart, it's like playing poker, you know? If you've been given a bad hand in poker, if you play it right, you might actually do really well with it, even though you've been given what most people would consider a bad hand. It's all in what you make of it. You know, they say that the blooming of an orchid lasts like 3 weeks, and the blooming of the great oak lasts 1,000 years. The time spans are different, but it's the same bloom. And in the same way, someone who has a glorious chart is like that oak that took so long to bloom. And if they've got the glory and they put it all in there, then that's great. But, you know, if you've got somebody whose chart is just really rough and you make something beautiful out of that, it's magic, you know? That's what alchemy is all about, turning lead into gold. Sometimes it's nicer when you've got a piece of lead that turns into gold. You took this thing that's worth a penny and made it worth $100, than to have a chart that's worth $80 and make it worth $100. Numbers, bleh. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to get used to this talking thing more and more as I do it, folks. I'm just going to see what kind of comments we got here. Oh, cool. Hi, Miss Bright. Jane Jones. Nice to see you guys. Yeah, maybe you'll still enjoy this. Lewis the dog and friend. We've still got lots of... I'm aiming to make these videos interesting to the sun signs when you're watching them as well. I don't know. It's all educational. Maybe you want to hear something about the year of the rat. Okay. Now, I know I just explained a lot of this. I'm just going to get down essentially the same thing in a little bit of an expanded way. The enemy signs, yeah, well, we're talking about bad dignity. I want to just show you guys the bad placements of bad and good dignity for our planets in question. Now, I'm going to put the sun every time when I do these videos, because this is, for anybody who's watching, for example, Year of the Rat, Sun in Aries, Leo, or Scorpio. If you're just interested in the sun, look at where your sun is placed in the chart. If it's one of those three signs, you're probably okay, because obviously Aries, Scorpio, and Leo are all friendly to the sun. So you'll do a little bit better there. But if you've got the sun in Aries or Scorpio, you will also want to consider where Mars is in the chart. And hopefully it will be amongst one of its friends in high dignity. Because a planet does better in a sign that caters to the nature of the planet. Because the signs and the planets are connected that way. Now, you can see here that these relationships work when the planets are working together. For example, the Sun and Mars are friends. So if you've got Sun trine Mars, it's a very good thing because they're naturally friends anyway, so they work together well naturally anyway. Excuse me. Whereas... Oh yeah, so my point is that this also works in terms of if you have the Sun in a Mars sign, the Sun's going to work well there. And hopefully you'll want Mars to be somewhere friendly as well, because then Mars can do what it wants to do in a more natural way. And we can see here if we've got the Sun or Mars, whatever planet we're talking about, in an enemy sign, it's going to have a harder time dealing with its own nature, and it's going to have a harder time expressing the positive potentials of the planet as well as the Chinese sun. So feel free to pause this and check out where the placements of your planets are and consider them as we move forward. And also, obviously, all these other different trines and, conjunctions to ill or benefic planets, or, malefic house lords like the 6th lord or the 8th lord. These are all things that if any of those things are going on, you'll want to really consider the placement of this prominent planet in your chart and the reading that we're going to hear. Now, we are going to take a quick look into... I just teased you guys with that. We're going to take a quick look at the themes and attributes of the signs involved with our planetary ruler today. So today's Pancha Tattva is the Fire Pancha Tattva, ruled by Mars. I would almost think that these should be read like a Nakshatra Sutra in the way that Viktakara talks about it, the way he does the sutras. In the sense that if the person in question, for some reason, lacks the things that are spoken of as a strength for this Pancha Tattva, these qualities, which we're about to describe here, they'll manifest in a negative way. In fact, I think I've got a note here. Yeah. This is essentially saying the same thing. The effects indicated by the dominant element, we're going to be talking about the Fire Pancha Tattva here. These effects represent some of the individual's finest qualities. If they're ruled, especially if they're ruled by this Fire Pancha Tattva, if the ascendant is here. More specifically, the rulership of the Pancha Tattva comes from your highest Shadbala planet. So if your highest Shadbala planet is Mars, then you'll get a lot out of this reading as well. But the point is that, the individual will often not be of the exemplary quality described in the sutras, because the sutras describe the ultimate ideal quality of the use of that planet. So, and the individual may simply be a less capable person as a whole, either temporarily or just in the chart, and so their elemental capabilities will be less. When attributing the qualities of the dominant element to a person, consider the elemental effects in respect to the whole horoscope and less to the person as a whole. Essentially what that's saying is that, these are positive qualities that are described in the sutra. And these positive qualities happen when Mars, for example, how the Pancha Tattvas work, I gotta get a pentagram. Yeah, there you go. Look at that. Cool. I do have this figured out. So we can see here that Mars in the generative cycle, I should show the whole thing, but in the generative cycle, Saturn provides something that Mars needs, and Mars provides something that Venus needs. And that's kind of how Mars finds its balance, right? And when this balance is in a good working order, when Mars can express itself competently, it's going to have the description that we find in the Graha Sutras. And you'll see what I mean. The question is if you're ruled by fire and you have all these qualities, but you can't express what is being asked of the fire Pancha, if you can't express that Mars properly, you're going to build up a lot of this fiery energy, and it's going to eat you. You know? That's kind of what we're considering here. I've got to always be making sure that you guys can see what I'm looking at here. We're learning. What I thought you guys were seeing there for that moment was these. Can you guys see me? Yeah. So we can see that that should say air. Saturn in the air Pancha Tattva gives Mars something that it needs, and Mars gives Venus something that it needs. And that's what I was talking about. When Mars is at its best, it tends to curb Venus by its natural nature. And that it tends to be at its best when Saturn is providing Mars with disciplined, detached action that's positive and productive. When Mars is open to Saturn in that way, Mars does not get all bubbled up. You know, you should have a positive Saturn placement in your chart in order to use Mars at its best. So, I'm going to move on, and then you guys will see what I mean once we poke around. The fiery-natured person is disturbed by hunger. Let me see if you guys can see me. Yeah. The fiery-natured person is disturbed by hunger, moving to and fro, heroic, lean, filled with knowledge, eating excessively, sharp, fair-bodied, and is opinionated. It's from Brihat Parashara Horashastra, the results of the 5 elements. So, the individual with the fire element dominating, essentially, we're including someone who has ascendant or sun in here, in one of the Fire Pancha Tattva signs. They have a very fast metabolism, and they are hungry, so they eat a lot. But even though they're eating a lot, they're still hungry. They maintain a lean body unless there are other metabolic disturbances. They are hungry to do, act, and perform. And though doing more than the average person, they remain hungry to do more. And they rarely stop to indulge in their successes before venturing forever onwards. Fire spurs them forward, and thus grants them courage where others may fear or hesitate to go. And thus the individual is heroic. Essentially, Ernst in these lines are describing why Parashara made these statements, right? He's saying fire spurs the people ruled by it forward, and it grants them a courage where others might hesitate to go. Being spurred forwards also causes them to be sharp and poignant in nature. They can be sharp and poignant, only going towards that which will be gripping, I guess, and fiery. I find this interesting because I'm a Scorpio, and although obviously you see the water element in Scorpio, but when you read this, you see the fire element in the Scorpio as a philosophical principle by which it's guided, even though it's a water sign. That's why I'm trying to do these Pancha Tattvas like this. The fire-dominated individual is very intelligent and knowledgeable, oftentimes surprisingly more so than their haphazard to-and-fro manner would suggest. Fire, however, is intuitive and logical, and so these individuals quickly learn anything that they're put their minds to. Being intelligent and fired up, these individuals are strong-minded and often opinionated. Fire tends to lighten the complexion, and so these folks are generally more fair-bodied and white-skinned and more sensitive to the sun. Having plenty of fire within themselves, they require less heat and fire from the sun. I was thinking white-skinned, but obviously there are people of colored skin who have this as well, but maybe they might similarly be more sensitive to the sun. So, these are all very positive qualities. And if you're ruled by these things, for example, if I've got the sun in Scorpio, so if my Mars was in, like, Gemini or Virgo, where Mars tends to think before it acts, it would just gather up a whole bunch of energy that it never puts in the right places, and it is a weak person. I've got to be careful with what I say and how I say it, but that shows that this primary attribute of the person is leaking energy because it's not being used in a way that's most natural to it, being in an enemy sign. And that would suck for a person with a Scorpio sun. So we can see, or Aries sun, or, Scorpio and Aries sun. Because then the Mars, which the sun leans on, would have a harder time in an enemy sign, and these things would still be happening. These qualities would still be going on. But maybe they would be hungry to do and act and perform all the time, and they're never satisfied, which is kind of a fire thing anyway. But nothing actually happens for them. They just put it into intellectual, analytical places because they're afraid to put it somewhere more courageous, which is more befitting to the nature of Mars. So we can see why it would be a harsh thing to have an emphasized Fire Pancha Tattva and to have an ill placement of Mars in the chart. Of course, that just means more karmic work for that particular person to do. Now, here's a quick little word. We've also even got what I've been trying to do with these discussions is to suggest that we also need to consider dashas when we're talking about these things. You might think that you've just got a crappy placement for your sign, or that you're just being heavily damaged in your life for some reason, and you might find that it might have something to do with the fact that you're in a dasha of your primary element, like let's say it's fire, or something relating to fire. If you're in your Venus dasha and you have heavy Fire Pancha Tattva placements, then, well, it's probably a good thing. You're probably being given lots of opportunity to discipline yourself and give yourself some virtue. Typically. Mind you, if you have excess fire, you can burn out the water. And excess fire is usually thinned out and regulated by a stern Saturn. Saturn provides Mars with a sense of duty and a healthy detachment and fulfillment, and this prevents a burning need or impatience to fulfill the duty. Now, Ernst Wilhelm, in his Graha Sutras, notes that these go in the way that they're going, like counterclockwise, and that's the generative cycle, and that's a positive thing. It can also be a negative, it can express itself negatively, which means that if you have too much Mars, you might make your fire so intensely dedicated and disciplined that it actually burns out all of your water. You know, water meaning you can be so much Mars that you never give yourself the time to relax because you've got Saturn whipping you in the back, which Mars wants. Mars wants to be whipped and be, whipped into shape, I should say. No sexual innuendos there. Mars wants to be whipped into shape and put in the Gatling gun position where it can like constantly be having something going on. That's my point. Saturn makes sure that Mars's energy is not wasted when it's being used properly. And Mars, as I said, Mars's drive and passion, it curbs Venus's self-contentment and satisfaction. Now I'm going to read just a little bit here from Ernst Wilhelm's Graha Sutras, describing the dissolution cycle, which is describing exactly what we're talking about right now. We see that the need for Venus to feel satiated and comfortable is curbed by Mars, who finds happiness in developing strength and character through disciplined activity, or else one could live constantly seeking comforts and fulfillment. If you're in like if you're in a Venus dasha, your natural Saturn character will find a balance for that Venus dasha. Some people on the Venus dasha are just become very lazy and indulgent. And if you... these are the connections I'm trying to make, okay? Let's say it's your Venus Mahadasha, and you've got prominent Fire Pancha Tattva placements. If you have the prominent fire, but your fire is weak, if your Mars is weak, or if your Aries and Scorpio signs, or if your Leo sign has got like, Saturn in it, or any kind of malefic stuff going on like that. And if Mars is garbage in your chart, when you come to this Venus Mahadasha, you are going to be soaked out. You are going to be probably super lazy because you will have been, if you've got no fire, you're probably hungry for something because you're a fire predominant person and you don't have the fire capacity to express it in a disciplined and structured way, which means you are going to get washed out on your Venus dasha and you probably won't take the best care of yourself if you don't have something anchoring it. It's the beauty of the Pancha Tattvas is it tells us that life is this moving thing. You can't just be so much water all the time, a beautiful, blissful person who has no fire, Mars, discipline. Or else, you'll develop a bit of a sweet tooth and you won't work hard because all of these elements and directions of consciousness add up to the ideal, which is non-dual and which is sattvic and which contains all of them in the ideal balance. And then the other one I wanted to say is that the need for Mars to be involved in disciplined activity is curbed by Saturn's ability for detachment, or else one could burn out by constant activity and overtraining. Yeah. So, usually, if you're in like a Saturn dasha of some sort, and if you are ruled by Mars or the Fire Pancha Tattva, or you have a prominent placement there, Saturn can be very hard on Mars. And if you have a prominent Mars placement, but it's weak or it's ill, if it's prominently placed but there's no, it's not a good placement, that fire energy is still going to be wanting to come through. And when the Saturn dasha comes, it'll probably wipe out the fire in a more negative way, in the sense that it'll still be good for the Mars, because Saturn always toughens Mars up in a way that Mars always needs, especially for a Mars-ruled person. But this will be a tough period if you've got a negative placement of Mars and it's a Saturn dasha. Saturn is going to whip you, and you're going to have this energy, and you're not going to be able to use it the ideal proper way that you would like to, or you're just not going to be used to that kind of discipline and to using it properly. So these are the things we have to consider when we're reading these kind of readings, like I said, you know. So, as we say here, confluence is key when we're talking about anything in any regard, in regards to astrology. Sorry, folks, I'm just poking around in my notes here. Oh yeah, we're getting there. Essentially, I was going to say that if you're in a Venus dasha or a Saturn dasha and you have a prominent Mars placement, you're probably going to feel a relief from Saturn disciplining you, or from Venus giving you kind of a break, you know, or giving your Mars something to do in a fun, enjoyable way. Now, sorry for the loaf, folks. I'm just getting all my things figured out here. Now, we're about to start talking about the Chinese animals. But first, we're going to give a little general quality rundown here. Essentially, yeah, okay, back in the groove. The qualities we just described relate strongest to your, if you've got your highest Shadbala planet in as Mars, or if your Atmakarika is Mars, or if the Lord of your Ascendant is Mars, these qualities should ring a bell, these fire qualities. Dang. I had something going on there. Great. For those watching this video for their sun sign, keep in mind that the sun is just one planet in the alchemy of your soul, and it too must take into consideration its dignity and the strength of the Lord that rules its sign. The sun is sort of like your mission in life in a constant sort of internal way. It's the galactic center whose energy powers your chart, as we have heard. The Pancha Tattva ruler of the sun sign can tell you a lot about yourself and the activities you tend to involve yourself in. So the sun in the active of these, that being Aries and Leo is what I mean by that, the odd-numbered signs. Aries and Leo are like more active, and then Scorpio is the more passive, right? The active signs are more proactive and outgoing towards that fire element. So both Scorpios and Aries and Leos, all of them are guided by this Fire Pancha Tattva principle. Even though Scorpio is a water sign, it goes about this passion, this conquest and hunger, this hunger to constantly be in conquest and to build and build and build and let go of itself in order to go towards, passionately towards that visceral goal, whatever it might be. Even though Scorpio is a water sign, it's still guided by these principles. It'll just do it in a more passive way. Aries and Scorpio and Leo all want to win, but Scorpio is willing to settle for the last laugh, usually. They'll disappear and they'll say, okay, all right, you win this one, whatever. I'm going to get you in the long run. And then they'll poison the well water or something like that, or not like that crazy, but that's how Scorpio tends to go about things, is slow, patient, constant endurance. Towards this Mars thing, though, it's still Mars. It's still the general that wants to win this war. It's just the guy in the back that's like, hauling the grenades and telling everybody where to go. Aries is the one, and Leo is the one who says, I got this, and goes out and tries to do it all themselves. Okay. Cool. Thank you for your patience, folks. I believe that every time I do this is an exercise for me. I'm trying to learn how to learn what's important to say 10 billion times. I think I've been saying some things too much already. We're learning, and I appreciate your patience with me in this endeavor to learn how to be a YouTube guy. I'm just peeking at the comments here. Sun, Aquarius, year of the dog. The most of Mars and Capricorn. Adam Boy, nice to see you. If you had been watching before, Adam Boy, I talked about how I don't usually deal with the fixed stars, like the sidereal consideration of the constellations as the signs. I tend to deal with the idea that when the sun lines up in a certain place in the sky, that signifies the start of spring. But it has to do with the fact of the Earth's distance around the sun, not to do with the fact that the sun is aimed at a constellation. I'm a Tropical Vedic Astrologer. Thank you for asking. And Mars in Capricorn is, especially for a placement like, actually, no, Mars in Capricorn is exalted, I believe. That's why we've got textbooks. Yeah, it is exalted. Okay, I see your question, Miss Bright. I think the best way... It's interesting because, as we saw in our previous panel, Saturn feeds Mars in the Pancha Tattvas. It's an interesting thing to consider that Mars is exalted in Capricorn. Isn't that something, huh? The best way I would say to take advantage of Mars in Capricorn is to plan diligently and you've probably got it anyway. If you've got Mars in Capricorn, you probably are passionate about subscribing and scripting yourself to having something to do. So, with Mars in Capricorn, I would just stay busy. Keep finding productive, disciplined ways without thinking of like a reward. It's more of a Venus thing to think of like, oh, come on, the good's coming back to me. Mars and Saturn does the best when it's like on a hike up a mountain and you only brought so many things like of water or whatever to bring up with you, and you get up there and you've realized that you're missing something that you need, or that you want to cross the river, and you're like, Mars and Capricorn is gonna get over there. I don't care, you know. When Mars and Capricorn finds moments like that, if you can attract those kind of things to yourself, those kind of moments where you have to think on your feet, that's probably something good for Mars and Capricorn to capitalize on. Now, I am learning about also... yeah, you're right, Adam Boy. I go by the nakshatras, if that's what you mean by the fixed stars. The derivations of the 27 lunar mansions, for example. I am very much into that. So that's a good point to dichotomize. Just because I'm not into the sidereal rashis doesn't mean that I'm not into the nakshatras. Anyway, what I was going to say is that feel free, everybody, to make some comments and opinions in our discussion, and I'll try to get to them when I can. And we're going to keep going along with that. Let's see now. You guys can see me. All right, we're really chipping along here, folks. Now we're going to start talking about the Chinese signs. And what I want to say in this regard is that confluence is key. What do we mean by confluence? It's when a factor or dynamic is emphasized in the Chinese reading, and a similar factor is emphasized in the tropical horoscope. They sort of say the same thing. This is called confluence. But please, please, please consider that this doesn't necessarily mean the similar use of a symbol. For example, as we know, in the Chinese astrology, there's fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. So there's fire, water, and earth in there. So they're the same word. Is that confluence? No. 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 Absolutely not. Just because the word is the same does not mean that they mean the same data. You know, it's like a word, all a word is like a sign, a symbol, a signal. But different words used in different contexts can mean completely different things. And that is the case when we see, for example, water in the Chinese chart versus water in the Western chart. They mean two different things. Although they can, obviously, they're named water because they're both flowing, and they have similar attributes, but just don't necessitate the corroboration, is my point. I mean, you're going to see what I mean when you get into Chinese astrology, but essentially it means that, you know, just because you have a lot of water in your tropical chart doesn't mean it's going to compensate for a lack of water in your Chinese chart, and vice versa. That's essentially what I'm getting at there. But when something is said in your Chinese chart and it's read as psychologically similar, relating with similar themes and dynamics psychologically, this is confluence. This is when they're combining together. Yeah. This is when these things are combining together in a way that is, well, it's these points of confluence which we seek as primary pillars in the chart, with which we can effect the greatest constructive transformations in the neurological field of the body and mind. And I say everything in astrology should be patiently meditated upon in the full context of the self-realization totems which guide your path. I like how I phrased this because when you think of self-realization totems, you don't necessarily think like symbolic things, you know, like, oh, I'm a Leo, so I should probably work with fire in my life or something. You don't go by, you know, the semantic symbol consciousness. You just have a thing in your head like an eagle, you know. Like you go out and do ayahuasca and you meet the coyote and it's that laughing energy, you know, and you say, oh, I've got to have more laughter in my life, you know. It's that kind of thing that you should allow astrology to be a support for. Astrology can only ever be an aid to your self-realization, and the self is a pretty liquidy thing. You don't really want to box yourself into anything. You use what you see in astrology to help you build towards finally quantifying that slippery, irreducible rascality of your spirit. Now, the Chinese sign affects some people more than others. Why is that? It's because the attributes of your Chinese sign sometimes compound the positive or negative attributes of your Western chart. There's no absolute formula for this. We are all pioneers in discovering how Ba Zi and Chinese astrology relates with tropical astrology. There's no books on it. You know, no one has dealt with this. So we got to start somewhere. So that's kind of what I'm doing with these videos, right? Confluence is key. Now, if I might just take un moment. Now, as the science of Ba Zi, or Chinese astrology, it's quite new and untouched in the history of Western esotericism, as well as even in the Vedic tradition. The Vedic people do not talk about this numerological thing that Chinese astrology is. Because it's not planetary, really. I mean, it is. It's planetary phenomena that you're watching. It's the cycles of days, which is like a solar phenomenon. It's the Earth floating, going around the sun a certain amount of hours per day. Whenever the Earth spins around, that's a new day, and that is the cycles. That's how they count the cycles. It's a numerological thing. But in any case, because Chinese astrology is so fresh to us in the West, I'm careful to note my sources. So that's why I just want to say all of my data comes from our lineage preceptor by the name of Master Zhongzheng Wu, whose writings have been blessed by the current president of the Chinese Taoist Association, Grandmaster Ren Farong. Essentially, these two books here are kind of like, these are the data bank textbooks for Ba Zi. Tiangan DZ is the Heavenly Stems and Earthly Branches, and then this is Calculating the Ba Zi by Dr. Karen Taylor Wu, who is Zhongzheng Wu's wife. So that's where my lineage comes from, and they are officially connected to the National Chinese Taoist Association. If anyone ever wants to ask me more about that, feel free. I'm just trying to note my sources and the ideal lineage that we got going on. Okay. So, now we're talking about, for those watching, we have talked a little bit about the three signs that are ruled by the Fire Pancha Tattva. It's Leo, Aries, and Scorpio. And what connects those three. So now we're talking about the Chinese animal. In particular, the sign of the rat for today. Each Chinese animal basically has 6 defining characteristics. These describe the attributes that the sign brings aesthetically to its relationships in love and business and friendship, which is the sphere, those social connections, the social feng shui. That is what is determined by Chinese astrology. Specifically, it's a social networking phenomenon. That's what Chinese astrology is. When you get into it and you look for it in yourself, you'll notice that it's not necessarily any inborn tendencies like it is in Tropical Vedic Astrology. Your sun sign, your Mars sign, all these things are an outcropping from your past experiences of your own making and your own decision making. Chinese astrology it's coming from your past and your past actions, but it's subliminal, neurological, and relates to the type of people that you enjoy hanging out with. So, what are these 6 defining characteristics and attributes that define the Chinese animals? Number 1 is its ascending or descending chi. The rat is, I don't have them all marked down on this page, but the rat is the start of the ascending chi. Meaning, at the start of there's 12 years in the whole Chinese cycle. The year of the rat is the initiator. It's the start of the chart, right? So he is the one that starts climbing up. And it, it climbs all the way up to the year of the snake, and then the horse starts the descending chi. So that's one way to describe the rat. It's an up-climbing, initiating energy. Number 2 is that it is numerically yang. It's an odd number, and it has a yang physical body, which you see in psychological behavior terms. When you talk to a rat person, they're just like, bang! They're a drill sergeant, and they really can be very cutting and penetrating with their actions. Although that's true, what you'll see in a rat's energetic nature is that it doesn't necessarily endure for a long time on one thing constantly and persistently. What it does is that it's more of it's actually a yin energy. So this is number 3. The third quality is the animal's energetic body. So this is most important when you actually get into Ba Zi, the Chinese astrology chart. Rat is a yin water. That's gui. That gui means yin water. And it has that yin water quality. So it's a water quality. It can be persistent, but it's not persistently hacking at things. Rat has a net of interests and people and connections that it makes, and it pulls each node towards the node that it's supposed to go to at the proper time, slowly, patiently, the perfect strategizer. That's yin water. What the yin water thing comes from is essentially when you energetically, the cycle of the animals goes yang yin, yang yin, yang yin. So it's like rat's yin water, tiger is yang wood, rabbit is yin wood, dragon is yang earth, and then snake is yang again. Yeah, so it goes yang, yin, earth, yang, yin, earth. That's how it goes. In any case, so, boar is the yang water animal. There's always a yang animal, and then there's the yin that's the descent from that yang. And rat is the yin water animal. So with this will all tie together. Basically, we're building the building blocks of what makes up the rat psyche when we read about the rat in textbooks. Now, there's also the modality to consider. I don't have it in here, but This is quality number 4, is the modality. It's not usually emphasized directly in Chinese astrology, but its effects are observable. Similar modalities behave similarly, but towards different directions. For example, rat is, there's a correlation of the Western signs with the Chinese signs. They say the rat relates with Sagittarius, and it's when you go by the months, there is a bit of that correlation there. The year of the rat happens in the middle of the sign of Sagittarius in the month cycle. The month of the rat starts in the middle of the sun being in Sagittarius. That's what I wanted to say. So, rat is mutable, just like Sagittarius is mutable. A square from the rat, 3 signs down from the rat, is another mutable sign, which would be the rabbit, right? There's rat. Oh yeah, I guess ox would come next, yeah. So it goes rat, ox, tiger, and then rabbit. So rat and rabbit are both mutable types. The rabbit relates with Pisces. That's its Western correlate. Even though I say that correlate, but don't ever think that they are similar, really. The only thing that's really similar about them is the fact that they're mutable. That's all you should read into it. So, rat is mutable, rabbit is mutable, horse is mutable, and rooster is mutable. There's always 4 of each modality because there's only 3 modalities, just like in the Western astrology. 3 times 4 makes up the 12 signs. If you read into the nature of all of the modality, all of the mutable animals, they have a similar vibe. They are choppier with their long-range energy. They never put all their eggs in one basket like the fixed signs would, for example. The fixed signs tend to put all their eggs in one basket. They're all very yang. Dragon and dog also just put all their chips in one thing and really try and really give it their all, and that's why they're like a laser beam, a fixed focused point on whatever it is that they're trying to do. So yeah, that was my point, is that rat and all the other mutable signs are not like that. They spread their energy out in order that they have a lot to play with. The year of the rat will do that. They say like a rat has many holes to go safely into in case things ever go wrong. And they're enduring in a way. That's why it's funny. You got to be careful with the words you use. I could say that the year of the rat is enduring, but they don't endure stupidly on one thing for a million years. They will survive in the long run, though. The rat is a survivor, if anybody is. Now, quality number 5 is the hidden stems. And essentially, each animal, you'll see them as we go along in this series. Each animal has a bunch of these hidden stems. The rat only has one hidden stem, and it is the same as its energetic body, which means they are strictly this one type of thing, which is yin water. Just about all the mutable signs are like that, actually. Rabbit is strictly yin wood. There's nothing else going on there. So because rat is just purely yin water, it's concentrated on that type of energy. Most of the other signs are more than just one type. That's part of what makes the rat so special and particularly penetrating and effective at what it does. The rat can be very persuasive, and they'll really pull your arm, and whenever they've got something going on, they really do have a deep set focus on what it is that they're doing. Whatever it is that they're doing is probably connected to many other things, so it looks like they're quote-unquote scattered. But each thing the rat is completely wrapped up in that one limb, in each little bit, and is dedicated to each of these little limbs. And it tries to be. So that's why the rat can be very persuasive, because it's purely this yin water. And it's a numerical yang animal. So that is part of where that hard, pressing nature comes in. Sometimes you got to read two sides of an attribute, you know? The rat is this yang penetrating thing, but it's also yin water. It's up to us as translators of the symbols to try to define how it could be that the rat could be yang in some instances while being yin water, even in the same instance, but in different ways. So, yeah, that's the hidden stem of the rat. Now we're going to get into the fun of the element triad. Now, disclaimer, in certain Western translated texts, the harmony triads are incorrectly labeled due to an improper inference from the signs that correlate with the Western zodiac, as I was just saying. So, there's a bit of a muck-up going on there in a lot of these books, such as the Handbook of Chinese Astrology, also Suzanne Leavitt's book, Taoist Astrology. These certain books have the improper understanding of the elements of the element triads. They acknowledge that there are triads, but what they did is that they said, you know, because rat relates to Sagittarius, we'll call it it's in the fire triangle. And dragon is in the same triangle, and dragon relates with Aries. So they called it the fire triangle, but it doesn't actually create fire in Chinese astrology. The triad of the rat, the dragon, and the monkey, rat, monkey, dragon, they're actually the water triad. They're a triangle which generates water energy in the Chinese astrology sense of water. Now, if you understand that Chinese astrology describes first and foremost the dynamics of one's mercurial energies and behaviors interacting with those of others, then you'll understand why I say that the harmony triads are an expression of the greatest power available to the animal sign as a member of a larger collective. What I mean by all that is that the strength of the Chinese astrology signs, like I said, it's a social thing. That's what it's describing. Chinese astrology is all about Chinese philosophy. A lot of their thing in general has this mentality that we're a bunch of people are all in this together doing the will of nature, and we are just another wielder of one of nature's many masks performing the tasks for this automatic thing of nature. So, us all being a part of that nature thing, the Chinese astrology comes from the philosophy which suggests that we are all one, and our powers are much greater, much more concise, when they are considered together as a unity and as a collective. And so that's why I say that part of the power that comes to the sign of the rat is the connections it makes to those in its harmony triad. The partners in your shared harmony triad, as well as your secret allies, which is something that we might have to talk about at some point. I think I might have forgotten to add it. The rat's secret ally is the ox. No, we do talk about it, yeah. So the animals in your same triad represent people who are psychically building the same kind of feng shui network that you are, the same kind of people network that you are. And so they'll work well together with you. They want to manifest a similar social circle vibe. And if you relate well with another person naturally, they're going to help you build your thing, and you're going to help them build their thing, and you're not even going to really try. And it's very fortifying and psychologically securing to have people who think about things organically in the same way that you do, and to build on each other like that. This is the primary grouping of Chinese astrology, these triads. In my opinion, where psychology is concerned, you first consider the element triad of the animal. That will tell you the aesthetic they are building for themselves. In the rat's case, it's in the water triad. Then you consider the qualities particular to the animal to see how they do their part to contribute to that group. The rats of the world probably don't even realize that they are helping to perpetuate the water triangles of the world. And you might have rat on your month branch, and you might connect well with people who have dragon on their month branch, and you might be together doing the water triangle thing and getting a lot out of it, Rat adds to the water triad of dragon, monkey, and rat with, it's the mutable of the three. We've got rat's the mutable sign, dragon's the cardinal sign, the earth sign, and monkey is the fixed sign. When these three get together, rat adds a mutability. It adds that tenacious capacity to make all the little connections. Monkey stays in one place and just owns it, and because it's the fixed water triad animal. Dragon is the big contract maker. It's the yang earth. It's the cardinal. And dragon will put he'll develop a skill, that he's got a brand, that he's got a powerhouse team, a company, an outfit that can crunch a specialized task. And rat will find the best place to use that skill of dragons. And so they can use each other very well. Now, I could talk about the water triangle. I think that a good idea for now is for us to hear a little reading from one of our writers of one of my textbooks on Chinese astrology. This comes from Theodora Lau's The Chinese Horoscope Guide to Relationships. This is her description of the water triad, which she calls the doers. She calls it the first triad. Maybe I should leave this up. I feel like I should. Yeah. Now, the first triangle. This is the first triangle because the rat is part of it. The first triangle is composed of the doers. They are made up of the first, the fifth, and the ninth branches, or the rat, the dragon, and the monkey. These personality types are hands-on people who love taking the initiative and are self-starters, needing little or no motivation from others. All three of these signs share this, and that's why part of why they work well together. Innovative and positive in their way of thinking, the members of this trio enjoy taking the lead, and their enthusiasm makes them capable and fearless leaders. Let's consider what this means in relation to the Fire Pancha Tattvas. Remember, we're still talking about people who have emphasized Leo, Aries, and Scorpio. We are reading about a Chinese year sign, which is innovative, which takes the lead, and their enthusiasm makes them capable and fearless leaders. For the positive, this can be a great combination for a Leo or an Aries or a Scorpio, whether it's the rat or the dragon or the monkey, because they also have an enthusiasm when working with other people. The rat has the capacity to be capable and fearless and enthusiastic. It works well when organizing people in that way. If you know a rat, they'll typically be someone who is getting everyone's information and is going along and communicating to people from the higher ups what ought to be going on, depending on the sun sign or the tropical chart of the person. They could do that in a passive way, like they could be a Pisces about it, or some other similarly soft passive sign. They could be Virgoing about it, which would there's a critical factor there, but ultimately it's slow and patient and is analytical. But here we have the bombast of the rat. We have the enthusiastic data collector, keeper, mover, shaker, that is the rat. And they tend, if they're ruled by the Fire Pancha Tattva, then they'll probably take these communication matters into their own hands. Maybe the higher-ups will say, well, you need 3 people on this job, 3 people on this job, and then 3 people on this job. Maybe the rat Scorpio will think in his head, we only need 2 people for that job, 2 people for that job, 2 people for that job. And I know my boss will think that I did great if I took one person from each of these and put them on this 4th task, so that when I go to my boss and my boss says, what did you do today, Scorpio rat? The Scorpio rat, having been enthusiastic not only as the rat, but also as the Scorpio or the Aries or the Leo, they took command and said, not only did we get the thing done, because maybe they would have to, if they wanted to make that choice, they would have to be the taskmaster, and the rat would do it. The rat would make sure that the Leo or the Aries or the Scorpio in them would go to the one group of 2 people, make sure they're not, dicking around and just got their hands in their pockets. The rat will come in and say, hey! And they'll make a big scene about it because he's Fire Pancha Tattva. And he'll show all this macho bravado, and they'll say, hey, what do you think you're doing? Keep working, come on, we've got the boss to please. Meanwhile, he's just got the boss to please, but they think that their job is to please him, maybe. Maybe he'll try to set something like that up. Then he'll go to the next group of just 2 people and say, hey, keep working. Then the next group of people and say, hey, keep working. And they'll make sure that all of those jobs, plus the extra job that they magically made, gets done to the utmost, just because they love to be able to do that. When they go to the boss, they said, oh yeah, boss, not only did I get those first 3 jobs that you wanted, but we had a little bit of time extra left over just because of my extra work, and you bet your ass we kicked ass on that 4th task too. So these are the kind of connections we can make between the rat and an emphasis of the Fire Pancha Tattva. Continuing on with our reading of the Water Triangle, which the rat is included in. So having little no doubt about their abilities or what they want in the Water Triad, these people are usually outspoken and opinionated. The rat is eager to learn, unafraid to practice their beliefs, and high-spirited in style. All three of them in the triangle. The Water Triad will have no difficulty in forging ahead. Do not expect them to admit that they are wrong or accept defeat graciously. It would be uncharacteristic for them not to assert themselves and try the untried, no matter what the consequences. I guess I was going to say that, you know, when if we're considering there's a double throw in the way of like energy and passion and vigorousness with the Fire Pancha Tattvas and the Water Triad. There is a similarity there. So, you know, if a rat who's like a Leo has to be told that they have to stop or that they should quit or that they're wrong, you know, or that, you know, if an insubordinate talks out a line to a Leo rat, the Leo rat will make them hear where their position is in regards to the Leo rat's position, especially if the Leo rat's the higher up. Pipe down, peasant! You know, so there could be a bit too much of that Mars coming through the fearless relentlessness of the unemotional Water Triad. They can be emotional and sentimental, but as we can see here, generally, those in the Water Triad, they're more practical than emotional. More optimistic than wise, which is an interesting one, and more restless than reflective in pursuing their dreams. So this is a lot like the Fire Pancha Tattvas, who were kept eating and yet were still hungry, like we said, you know. The three personalities of the Water Triangle must always perform and act out their ideas to find happiness and success. So they're very much actors, you know. This is a Leo, Scorpio, Aries. Admittedly, as much as I was saying that they might be the executive type, I think the emphasis to be laid is that they might be an executive. The rat, you know, will tell people what to do, but they are put best when they can like maybe as like a salesman, you know, because they really act out and get into whatever it is that they're doing. Part of the rat's charm is that they're in the characters that they're playing or the emphasis that they're making. They really get riled up and in it. The fire might even exacerbate I guess the restlessness was the point. They're more restless than reflective, more optimistic than wise, you know. Mind you, the fire types are discerning, and if their signs are working out well, and if their planet, Mars especially, is doing well, then this might curb this nature of the rat. The rat's more the whole Water Triad is more optimistic than wise, meaning we don't know exactly if it's going to work out, but we just kind of want to see it kind of go down. The Fire Pancha Tattva will probably help to curb a bit of the who gives a heck factor, you know. They'll rein in, make the rat more sharp and poignant if their fire is worked out well and in the right way. So the Water Triad I hope you guys are digging this. This is like my first time combining the Chinese reading with the Western reading, and I'm enjoying the heck out of it, but I'll get better at it as we go along. Those in the Water Triad will strive to make their mark by what they say and do, and they implement their ideas into reality by their own hard work and willpower. It's something Rat loves to do. Not just to be an executive, but to actually go to the rooms and see the other workers and say, hey, hey, and push them in the back and say, keep going, right? Or just to be viscerally a part of whatever it is they do. The Water Triad tends to enjoy. Judging others by accomplishments rather than words, they can be tough and competitive in their outlook, and you must impress them with strength and a good track record before you can gain their respect and cooperation. However, once they do give their wholehearted support and commitment, these doers will not easily abandon their objectives or principles. You can definitely see that these people can be amongst the toughest people that there really is people who are an Aries or Leo or Scorpio, Rat, or anyone in the Water Triangle. But yeah, the Rat. We can see that these can be tough and competitive in their outlook. They judge others by accomplishments rather than words. Meaning, you can talk the talk, but like, what have you, show me. That's very much a Rat thing, a Water Triad thing, and it's an Aries, Leo, Scorpio thing. So, a lot of these attributes are really just very much squashed together in the character of a Rat in the Fire Pancha Tattva, for better or worse. These arrogant, judgmental attitudes, these high-minded, show me what you got, Hercules sort of vibes, can be overemphasized with these people, and they probably will be at the start of life. They'll probably be obnoxious at first. The dignity of the planets will probably describe whether that obnoxiousness stays or whether this type of personality blooms into the strong yet still reserved when they need to be type of leader that is ideal, right? The balance of the Fire Pancha Tattva having some kind of Mars giving it discipline, so it's not just all gusto. Yeah, that was cool. That was fun. So that was the Water Triad. Worked out pretty good. That was the Water Triad and all the animals who, these three animals, rat, dragon, and monkey, when considered in relation to our Fire Pancha Tattva. Now, I should also say, briefly, each animal also has a secret ally with whom the animal is granted access to elemental social networks that they don't normally go for. These, there's two of each, and they work well together, and it's rat and ox. They work well together, and because they are in different triads, they can compensate for lacking attributes between each other. Rat and monkey and dragon are very similar, although different, and their differences, their differences are part of what allow them to complement each other so well. The rat and the ox are very different, although they're both water types on the face. Not really even. The ox is more of an earth type. So rat and ox are essentially, they're pretty different. But since they're in this secret best friend thing, essentially how it works is, rat and ox are best friends, then pig and tiger are best friends, then dog and rabbit are best friends, rooster and dragon, monkey and snake, and then horse and goat. So ox and rat can help to compensate for the natures in each other. And together, they make the earth element. For me, that signifies that the ox is an earth type. The ox's element is yin earth, and the rat's in their energetic body, and the rat's energetic body is yin water. So for me, what that says is that ox stays, kicks up some dirt, makes a brand, organizes some resources, and pats some backs, and ox really sacrifices for people, and he's out there showing people that he can help and wants to help, but not only that he wants to help, but is also useful. That's ox's thing. He's constantly making himself useful to people. Rat is a good organizer. Rat knows all the people that ox knows, and rat probably, again, the two of them together make an earth vibe. So rat probably caters to the earth of the ox. And together they can, the rat is hard enough to deal with the ugly sides of business that ox is not so penetratingly forward about. Ox is a Spartan. Ox is a warrior, and he won't take any guff. He won't allow you to bring down his castle. He'll just be right there and just, nope, not happening. But he's the one defending and fortifying the castle. The rat is the one that goes out and gets treasure from other castles, so to say, right? So that's why those two work well together. So now I'm going to attempt to make a merged picture of the animal and the Pancha Tattva. But first I just want to say hello, and I'm going to see some of our comments that we got going on here. Cool. I'm just seeing what you guys got. Miss Bright, Adam Boy. What are fixed stars and fixed zodiac? Yeah. Stars that mark the start of the season. The stars that mark the start of the seasons. That's not how I would put it. Essentially, I think that the fixed stars is fixed portions of the sky. The stars are always changing. 2,000 years ago, the stars didn't look quite like they do. Starlight only lasts so long. Stars are going out all the time. So the stars move a lot, and they're not perfectly fixed. But there's still a fixed zodiac. There's still a fixed galaxy. And essentially, the most fixed place you could quote unquote, even our whole galaxy is moving. But the center of the Milky Way, of the galaxy, the Milky Way, that is something that we float around. And our distance from it, even it's all changing. But just like the distance between the Earth and the Sun, it's moving, but the orbit is fixed. And so our galactic orbit floating around the center of the Milky Way is also fixed. It's a set orbit. And the shape of our galaxy and its directions are fixed, but the stars are not necessarily fixed markers for the galactic directions. That's the problem, right? So it's a confusing question to answer. What are fixed stars and fixed zodiac? Something definitely to think about. It's we're talking about and debating about this stuff all the time in astrology on YouTube these days. I would love to talk about it more, but for now, we have a video to finish. So, now we're emerging on a picture of the rat born in the born with a prominent, emphasized signs of Aries, Leo, or Scorpio in a chart. So I'm just going to try to start describing the differences between Western astrology and Chinese astrology, just to put this in a bit of context. To oneself, the person tends to be characterized by, internally, by their tropical astrology. Your occupation, your identity, your family, your customs, your relationship to duty, your self-understanding, your work ethic. Essentially, the how of the equation of the self is described by tropical astrology. That's what I was trying to get in your brains there. Everything in one's life boils down to the figures of the tropical horoscope. That is my bias. I'm sure, of course, maybe I should have said this from the start, but, well, yeah, I have been. I'm a tropical Vedic astrologer. So I believe that everything essentially boils down to the figures of the tropical horoscope. The Chinese animal simply relates to the aesthetics and feng shui of one's preferred relationship network, which the soul must work through as an appendage. The tropical Vedic astrology soul must work through the nature seen in the dynamics of Chinese astrology. And in the aesthetics and feng shui of one's preferred relationship networks. So, what I always say, that's why feng shui attracts luck, or that's how it attracts luck. Feng shui is the Chinese art of having a certain flow in your home. There's a universal feng shui that makes everybody happy in your home, but the idea of flying star feng shui is that the luck, it doesn't come from an internal attitude adjustment. Like, that's more of an Ayurveda thing. If you find in your Ayurveda practice that you don't have enough Mars, the Pancha Tattva, then you might wear something red, and that might ground the intention of Mars for you. And that's like a psychedelic, magical anchor outside of yourself to help you ground the intention that your subconscious is not as tuned to as you feel it should be. That's like an Ayurveda thing. It's an internal attitude adjustment. If you want to attract luck through feng shui by adding some red in your house, it might be because you are, you have too much wood in your chart, which is a green color vibe. So you want to have something to draw some of that wood out, and so the red would attract fiery people to your house, perhaps, or some other vibe. It's hard to, feng shui is its own thing, But if you wanted to wear red for a Chinese astrology purpose, it would probably involve the people, like in your office, who are coming to your office all the time. If you include some red, it might add more fire to the way that you deal with people. And if that's something that you want, it'll attract luck, because you'll attract people who are attracted to that red color. Or, some moments and vibes that vibe to that red color. So, feng shui attracts others of like mind. So the Chinese animal is the what of the equation. There's a how and a what. And you could probably describe them both ways, but this is how I've come to try to describe these two things. Tropical astrology is the how, meaning how do you live in your life to get to the glorious moment where you involve yourself with other people, because that is the what. The Chinese animal shows like what you are doing in your involvement with other people. Tropical astrology is more of the how. It's just a metaphor, so let's see if we can expand on this idea just based on this how and what thing. My idea here is that tropical astrology emphasizes the unconscious without a social context. Tropical astrology shows how the light of your awareness is internally guided through past impressions, ego development, and logic towards your involvement with others, if and when you do involve yourself with others. You know, if you go off on a mountain and you're meditating and stuff and you're just trying to exit worldly consciousness and tune more within, you won't be talking to many people. You won't be conducting much business. Really what you'll just be doing is whatever your karma is in your Tropical Vedic astrology. Someone looking at that picture won't see any personality in it per se, right? Like it's not like you're going to see the qualities of the rat from a person who's just sitting here not saying anything. But you could see a very prominent sun, for example. It's a person who has found an internal authority to which they have completely devoted themselves and fixed themselves to. Or you could see like a prominently placed like Saturn, where the person is disciplined and diligent about working out their karmas, you know? So you can see the tropical chart in that person in the Himalayas not doing anything, just sitting there. There's no interpersonality. There's no interpersonal dynamics going on. There doesn't need to be, because they're not talking to anybody. So this is what tropical astrology is showing us. It's who we are before we are introduced to the social world. Who are you when nobody is around? What is your will outside the context or inside the context of interpersonal dynamics? Now, the Chinese animal is more like the what. It's not the how. Oh, come on. Don't do this to me. Whatever. So feng shui attracts others of like mind. So the Chinese animal is the what of the equation. It's not how you deal with yourself when you get there. It's like what happens when you get there in the world with other people. Your interpersonal dynamic. Where tropical astrology is usually defined with light. Jyotish is the word for astrology in Vedic India. Jyotish means the science of the light. And of the light, essentially the idea is that it's like the progression of the light bodies of the planets around the central light being the soul, Atma, within. So it's called the science of the light and how they work out. I'm going to work out exactly what I'm going for here. I would relate Chinese astrology to all of the senses. I almost feel like Jyotish is metaphorical as light. It's not necessarily beams of photon rays, blasting between the planets. I don't think that's what Jyotish is implied at its root. At the root, I think it more implies awareness, developing conscious awareness. light is seen as a metaphor for awareness cropping up as the logos, as the past impressions, as the evolving soul. So it's usually described through light. Chinese astrology, it's a multi-sensual thing. It's a multifaceted metaphor. I almost would closer relate it with sound if light was going to be the Jyotish thing. Now, I shouldn't even, because again, the light is a metaphor of awareness. The witness that is aware of the senses. But Chinese astrology comes through as, anyway, it's like the sound, smell, taste, touch, and sight of your subconscious music and that of others towards which you are attracted and which you socially identify with, or which you don't. I should put that in there. You're not, part of Chinese astrology is that you are naturally attracted to some people's unconscious aesthetic, while you are naturally averse to some people's unconscious aesthetic. If you can like one, you must be able to dislike another, because that's the part of the yin and the yang. If there's something likable, that means there must be something undesirable and possible, or else everything would just be what you like, right? It's the yin and the yang. So Chinese astrology represents the style or aesthetic of group identity in which you tend to involve yourself, and through which you may contribute your subconscious personality and neurological energy in harmony or disharmony. And both are important. Believe it or not, Chinese astrology again tells us that you're going to find people who are averse to your way of thinking, and you have to realize that they are compensating for attributes that you don't naturally take on. And all attributes are important. That's why I always say Chinese astrology is united. It's a description of all humans in nature as being one united consciousness, dealing with this five-sided ship whose peaks appear out of the water and then are submerged again. Every now and then one peak will come out. Like there's too much earth right now. It's 2018, the year of the Earth Dog. There's too much earth. And everyone is like dealing with that jag sticking out together. So if you are in disharmony with a group, you should keep your own group that you're in harmony with in order that you can constantly generate energy with them. But then your group should eventually at some point venture outside of the comfort of your mutual association and interest, and venture into dealing and debating and talking and having fun with people who are not inside your own triad and who you are disharmonious with. Because finding harmony in that disharmony is a beautiful thing, because we're all in this together. It's also functional. It's not just some hippie fad. It's functional if we're all working, even though some of us are intrinsically disharmonious. Where human groupings are concerned, when we act as one, we are one body. Chinese cosmology shows nature acting through us, borrowing our soul energy to conduct its charming geomathematics, geo meaning of the earth. So this is something where I've made a question of the difference between tropical astrology and Chinese astrology. And, the question is does our Chinese nature borrow from our spirit, our tropical Vedic soul, or does our spirit ride nature like a surfer? Meaning, does all this Chinese astrology stuff on top of or below the soul? Or, you know, my whole point is that we should consider the surfer and the surf one non-dual consciousness. It's your consciousness. You are the arbiter of witnessing both of these things happening. And they happen as one, you know. But essentially, it's like two floating balls in a river. The one goes blung, 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 and the other goes blung, 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 blung. And the two waves meet in the water, and they do this, and they get all smashed together. And it looks like they're, you know, they're coming from two places. But when they come together, they're really... I guess it's the opposite like that, isn't it? Because they're essentially one, but we perceive them through astrology as a duality. In any case, I think I'm trusting where I was going there with that. The two balls, the waves come together as one, because ultimately they are one non-dual consciousness. Anyway, so you see what I mean. Even though we dichotomize them, they are two dimensions of the self, which is not intrinsically dual, but which is non-dual. Okay, so that's the end of our fun little thing ding. Whew, yeah. I started this pretty late tonight. It's like 4:30 in the morning right now. So I'm not as fresh as I feel I could be, but I think that this was a very good beginner session, tryout session. Now, since we are still here, we are still live, and I'm not going down yet, folks, what we're going to do, as the last part of these videos, as I have promised, let's do some reading about how other authors have described this particular personality combination. Which essentially means, if anybody's interested for this next little bit, we are going to be reading from some books describing the combination of these two signs. I'm going to find ways of just... I've got a lot of junk, I think. All these little things. Maybe I'll make one video that describes all of these things as I've just described them. Maybe it'll be this video. And then I'll make one video describing all the little slides that I've got here. And then when you come to a video, you'll see, okay, so what's the basics?